Bananas, Jesus. Good morning, everybody. The 35th Guam Legislature is back from recess. When we left off last night, we are in the second reading. Senator, Vice Speaker Selena Nelson, you are recognized on Bill 23-35.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I begin, I'd like to thank you for pushing the bill into the public hearing and in such an expeditious manner, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I just want to say, Madam Speaker, this is an effort to bring some equality.
I know. Good morning, Vice Speaker, if I may, could you please move the bill to the third reading and we'll have discussion on that? Consigue, por favor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to move the bill into the third reading file and discuss.
With discussion, please go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess my coffee was a little bit strong this morning. I'd like to thank you again for moving the bill forward in an expeditious manner, and thank you for ensuring that it was given a public hearing. Really, this bill is a purpose to bring some equality within our government system in regards to veterans' points. Now, the intent of the original federal employment laws was that veterans are allowed to have a 5 points preference upon employment. And in 8-2, Mike 2-8 Romeo, Part 4, Section 8, Chapter 8, revised July 2nd, 2014, it states veterans must be charged from active duty under an honorable or general discharge to be eligible for veterans preference. And it specifically states, Madam Speaker, veterans preference does not apply to internal agency actions such as promotions, transfers, reassignments, and reinstatements. And we heard in the public hearing, Madam Speaker, the inequality that the current law proposed on those that were not in the military, for those that were not veterans. And essentially, it impacted a lot of the promotions we saw last term that's within the Guam Police Department and within Guam Fire Department. There was appropriation and money available to give our public safety officers a promotion, a long overdue promotion. It's very rare that those that are in our public safety, those that protect us, we have the affordability to allow the promotions of the ranks. And so in this time, many people that were affected, there were many people who were affected that were not veterans, when some veterans went off on deployment or additional training or schooling, that they stayed home, sacrificed their time away from their family to cover down for those that were absent in support of our country. And so, Madam Speaker, it's just an opportunity for those that stay here on the home front and guard and protect our interests, our safety in our community, to give them an equal balance when it comes to promotions, as it was originally intended within the federal law. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Si Diyos ma, si Vice Speaker, anybody on the main motion? If there's anyone? Senator, you wish to speak, Senator San Agustin? Senator San Agustin, por favor, consigue muna.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just rise in support of the bill. Number one, I've been approached by many of my constituents saying that they support the military, but some of them, we need to also remind ourselves that the military today is a volunteer Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force. And on many occasions, the departments here on Guam and agencies on Guam have been denied the opportunity for upward mobility, and only because the preference points will matter. You would have an individual go through the whole gamut of meeting all the requirements of that department to get promoted. Then later to find out that the individual that was on military duty for 12 months can demand under the USERRA, because of this law, to be able to participate. And then they'll have the advantage of the 5 or 10 points, because it's 5 points for being a veteran, 10 points for being disabled. So that causes an imbalance in the promotion process. And I honestly believe that this bill will correct and make sure that it's balanced. And just for the record, I am a veteran. I'm retired from the United States Army, and I'm in support of this bill to bring some balance to the community.
Thank you very much, Senator San Augustine. Anybody else on the main motion? If not, Senator Shelton, can you please? Oh. Senator Pidal Terlahi, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm in support of the introduction of our colleague regarding the 5 points that was given to the military. However, I just want to make an addendum to that bill, and I was talking to the sponsor of this bill and the chairman of public safety. I must say that we have a lot of repercussions on the last promotions for the police department. So my plan is, because before you enter the police, being a police officer, you need to actually have training with the Balea training requirements under the post, the police standard requirements. So I was talking to the sponsor of this bill, and my plan is to include the Balea training with that of the initial police training, and expand that training to 6 months, and that would give, once they graduate from the Balea and the police training, they can get the 5 points to make it easier for them to enter the police department. I want to make clear, however, that we will not lower the standard of the police training. So, and that has been a long time a study that I made in order to move away from some of the controversies on the last police promotion. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Sutuas Masi, Senator Terlahi. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Speaker Munya Barnes, you are recognized.
Situs Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the measure of this bill and the intent, and I'd like to know if I could just have a minute recess to consult with the author of the legislation, because there was a recommendation that came in from the Department of Administration, Mr. Ed Burtons, who handles personnel, and in his letter to me as the oversight chair, he notes some specifics that may better define the intent of the legislation. So I'd like to confer with the Vice Speaker on this, if I may.
We'll take a 1-minute recess.
Situs Masi.
We're back in session. Speaker Tina Munya-Barnes, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to confer with the good author of this legislation and the concerns that I had based on the interpretation. I am satisfied. So I just say that I stand in support. Sana Masi.
Situus Masi, we'll take a 1-minute recess.
The legislature's back from recess. Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak on the main motion? Senator Jim Moylan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to pledge my support for Bill 2335. My past experience as an Army veteran and also my experience as a government employee, I feel this is a fair bill and justifiable, and I also like to ask, based on my personal experience and how I wish to move with this bill, is also wish to be a co-sponsor of this bill, if I might kindly ask that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the motion to include Senator Jim Moylan as co-sponsor, hearing no objection, motion carries. Anybody else on the main motion? Senator Mary Torres. Put for vote, Consigi.
Madam Speaker, I won't ask to be a co-sponsor, but I do want to give accolades to to the mover of this bill, because one of the things that we've noticed over time is that we're always trying to encourage our citizens to do their best and to advance in their careers. And a lot of times we offer incentives, and we offer ways to allow people who are disadvantaged to get their foot in the door. But it's always presumed that once your foot is in the door, it's really up to you to excel. And that's on you. And for all those people that have taken the effort and the time and the sacrifice and the investment to further their education, to do the best that they can at their jobs, and to perform above and beyond, they truly are deserving of meritorious advances. And in that regard, this bill helps to level the playing field for those people who have really taken upon themselves to make their lives better and to improve their situation and the situation of the employers that they work, the employment within which they work. So with that, I give my full-hearted support to this bill, and I also commend the author for correcting something that I think is a good step towards incentivizing us to do better for ourselves, by ourselves, and for our colleagues that we work with. Jesus Masi.
Buen provecho, Senadora and Torres. Anybody else wishing to speak on the main motion? Vice Speaker Nelson, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleagues for their support. Really, this is a bill that brings equality for all. And so, sometimes it can be challenging to present this kind of bill because of the, perhaps, of the pressure we feel on both sides, but I'd like to thank them for their courage and their support on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sijos Masi, Vice Speaker Nelson. Ladies and gentlemen, the next...
And Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to move the bill to the voting pile.
That's right, on that motion, without any objection, motion carries. We are now on Bill number 4. Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill number 4-35 LS on the third reading file. I would like to discuss it.
Consigue mo na, Senator San Agustin. Put for vote.
My colleagues, presently Public Law 34-116 renders the increased tax rate to be applicable on real property improvements of $1 million only, with no inclusion of specific language defining terms within standing legislation for real property improvement in excess of $1 million. Failure to correct the verbiage to include improvement exceeding $1 million will result in continual unrealized and uncollected revenue or prospective subject tax levies for the territorial education facilities funds. My colleagues, I had passed out the letter from Acting Director Lester Carlson. You'll find on page 2 to that document. In FY 2019 adopted, TEF revenue was projected to be $38,301,107,000. Difference of $9 million from FY 2018. Adopted revenue of $29,260,403,000. You'll find on the third column the agency that will be impacted. Currently today, if this bill does not pass, the Department of Education would be the largest agency hit, with approximately $4.7 million, followed by Public Works bus operation of 2.5. And if you notice, just those two agencies are all education related. The next highest would be University of Guam Capital Improvement Fund. If you notice on that list, my colleagues, these are all related to education. Today, Bill 4-35 seeks to correct the verbiage that was inadvertently omitted in Public Law 34-116 that only levied additional taxes on real property improvements valued at $1 million. By clarifying this tax shall be property valued at $1 million or more. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. So that we're clear, Senator San Augustine, can you just do a call that you have disseminated this for the public's, for our colleagues' review?
Yes.
This wasn't submitted in the committee report, so I just want you to acknowledge to the podium that we accept this.
Thank you.
No,
Yeah. Asked to be added on? Okay. Yes, Madam Speaker. I asked that it be added on. That's why I had it disseminated, because I was looking at the committee report and I noticed this letter, but the second page wasn't there. So I'm like, there was something else inadvertently
C.
missed.
Juice
Thank
Masi
you.
on that motion without any objections. Motion carries. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? On the main motion? Senator Pito Terlai, por favor. Consigue muna.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, in the beginning, when I was looking at this particular bill, I had thought that, some of that money can be used for Guam Memorial Hospital because the hospital really do need a lot of cash. But then when I further talked to the sponsor of this bill, I found out that most of the money is being used for the goods of Senator, focus on education. So I'm in support of this bill. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
C. Juice Masi, Senator Terlai. Senator, Vice Speaker Nelson, you're recognized on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just to, as a caveat as to Lester Carlson's letter, so the public knows, the Guam Department of Education operations, the reduction will be $4.7 million. The first generation trust fund initiative, $34,813. Department of Public Works for bus operations, $2.5 million. Department of Chamorro Affairs, $423,000. DCA Guam Educational Telecom Corporation, PBS, Guam, $198,000. UOG Capital Improvements Fund, $304,000. UOG First Generation Fund Initiative, $174,000. GCC Capital Improvements, $87,000. GCC First Generation Trust Fund, $69,000. Guam Commission for Education Certification, this is where our teachers go to ensure that they are certified, $91,000, which is probably cutting out their staff to even process these certifications. The Mayor Council of Guam Grounds Maintenance, $151,000. So we know that some of our village mayors, go to the schools and help them when they need grass cutting for the interscholastic sports, and also some of the landscaping so that the schools are not overgrown with bush and grass. Mayor's Council of Guam Public Safety and School Education, which brings us to a total appropriation of $9 million. And Madam Speaker, just to say that already in 2018, GDOE, Guam Department of Education, already made a $12.2 million cut. And some of those cuts impacted, as listed, are the freezing of hiring at Central and School Administration, which was $2.2 million. Reduced contractual services, which is $3 million. This can go from maintenance to their HVAC, their air conditioning. This is also the cleaning of the school restrooms so that the students have a clean environment to go to school in. Delayed pre-K expansion, which means that those that are young and parents would like to be able to give them a head start into school, this program was delayed. They redirected a lot of funds, redirected library funds, so some of the librarians were impacted by this. And we all know that our students need to go to the library to study and do additional research, especially many of our students who don't have access to the internet at home. So they stay behind, stay in school, and do their homework at school. Redirected textbook funds, we already know that we have many of our textbooks in our schools are outdated, and maybe we don't like to talk about it, but it's a fact that our students, what we're teaching them is outdated information. Delayed onboarding of substitutes. Substitutes are very important in our education community. Many of our teachers, you know, they really strive to make sure that they have perfect attendance, but they also have families to care for, and they also do get ill from time to time. And so really that did hinder a lot of the operations within the schools. Teachers had to give up their preparation period where they grade papers, they contact parents to cover down for other teachers because the substitutes were not present. And then also the pro rata for charter school budget reductions, so even our charter schools were impacted. Now, in addition to that, Madam Speaker, what will further be impacted is our sports and facilities equipment. So that means during lunchtime that the kids will be impacted where they won't have perhaps like the soccer ball, the basketball, or things that they need during lunch to keep them active. And we all know that as growing children, we need to ensure that our children are engaged, and as they go through that growing process, they have an outlet. And sports is a very positive outlet for our children. And so this is going to directly impact that. Operational funds are going to be impacted. Funds for Simon Sanchez High School. It's been so many years already since we've been appropriating money to DOE to get Simon Sanchez rolling. We now put it in the superintendent's hands to ensure that Simon Sanchez can be properly bidded out to rebuild that school. Library funds will continue to be impacted, which means that a lot of the books in the libraries are also outdated. The impact of the internet services will be also affected, and the elimination of after hours and summer activities. And so after hours and summer activities, you know, is what we used to know as DEED, where the students stay after school and they you know, have some time to unwind from the day, and then they do their homework, and a lot of teachers give their time for this. A lot of staff give their time for this, also to include interscholastic sports. So really, this is the whole growth that's going to be impacted, and maybe it's kind of conflicting, but when we run on 3 pillars, right? We always say education, public safety, and health. That's basically everyone's general platform, and so this is an opportunity for us to stay true to that platform. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Si Jules Masi, Vice Speaker Nelson, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm also very concerned about the list of that Vice Speaker the previous speaker spoke about, and particularly about the cuts to our Guam Public Library system, our DPW bus operations, and the rebuilding of Simon Sanchez High School. And so I stand in support of this bill, and if the author of the bill will yield to a question regarding the testimony from our public hearing, the acting director of the Bureau of Budget and Management Research suggested in his testimony for language to be included in the bill and shall be retroactive to real property taxes for 2018. So I'd like to ask if the author could talk about the decision, because it was not included, so I'd like to hear about that.
Thank you, Legislative Secretary Shelton. Senator San Augustine, would you like to answer that inquiry?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. After speaking with BBMR and DRT and even the governor's office, I advised them that I'm going to allow the bill to be introduced as introduced, but after speaking with legal today, if we can get a short recess, the amendment will be added and introduced to identify to retro the collections to the date of the Budget Act, which would be August 2018.
We're going to go ahead and take a brief recess. The legislature's back from recess. There was a question on the floor. I'm going to go ahead and address Senator San Augustine on the inquiry, please.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, the question that was asked is that why wasn't it addressed? The tax commissioner, this could be handled administratively if this bill is passed, and I leave that up to the tax commissioner to decide. That is the governor. Okay? Thank you.
Cito Smasi. Senator Shelton, does that answer your inquiry? Cito Smasi, on the motion, would you like to speak on it? Or are you okay? Legislative Secretary, are you okay? Okay. Anybody else on the main motion on Bill 4? Senator Castro, you're recognized. Por favor, consigue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to the bill, and I have several sources here, so if you just bear with me as I sift through some of this. My opposition rests on 2 points. First, I really think we need to revisit TEF. While I don't stand in opposition to what TEF is designed to protect in terms of these dedicated sources of funding, I like to challenge my colleagues down the line eventually to go back to why TEF was established. It's a protected fund, a facilities fund. And yes, I don't think we should compromise bus operations, but just to state my point, I don't understand what bus operations has to do with educational facilities. Now, don't get me wrong, I support all the initiatives that are listed here as a lifelong educator, but I'll leave that as a may. That's for another time. I do have a series of questions I would like to ask the author if he would yield, but let me go ahead and state my question so he can determine best which ones he wants to answer.
Well, we'll go ahead and take it one at a time, and then I'll go ahead and yield to him, Senator,
Sure.
if I may.
Okay, so let me just go ahead and preface by saying we're looking to make grammatical changes to a bill that was passed that is intended to raise an additional $8.5 to $9.5 million. Notwithstanding the fact that several sources are indicating in writing, in hindsight, these are not prospective numbers here, these are realized figures, that not only have we finished FY18 with a budget surplus, we're tracking even in January that revenues have exceeded expenditures. And so, you know, the rhetorical question comes back at me, if you're gonna pull $9 million, if that's gonna be a shortfall, how are you gonna make that up? Well, if the reports are correct, that
Point
there's
of
been
inquiry, Madam Speaker.
I apologize, Vice Speaker.
Yes, if there is a revenue or excess that the previous speaker is talking about, perhaps he can produce the documentation so that we can see.
I sure will.
Because I do share the same concern.
Point of order,
so if we can take
Madam
a
Speaker.
quick,
We
if we
will
can
go ahead and take a minute recess,
Madam
please.
Speaker, so we can acquire that document.
The legislature's back from recess. I will allow Senator Castro to finish his statements, and then if there are any documentations, the inquiry is for the author of the legislation. I will make you finish your comments, and then we will proceed. If the body wants to read and refer to the statements for copies, I will ask that copies be made then.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's very considerate of you. I'd like to finish a concept. I don't mind being asked for my references. I think that's only right and proper. But what I think is improper is interrupting me in the middle of my sentence. I just want to say the point.
I apologize.
So my first
Please
reference,
proceed.
and I'll go ahead and read the reference into the public record, because I have several of those. So if we're going to stop after every sentence, I won't be able to deliver a cohesive
Please proceed. Thank you, Senator.
order. Can we get some order here?
Please, you can proceed.
My first reference in support of my assertion that there's been published reports of a cash surplus, and I reference, produced by the Transition Advisory Committee on page 103, dated 2018. And I'll quote, the total estimated cash outlay for the month of January 2019 is $81.5 million and includes disbursements or set-asides for debt service, etc., etc. Last sentence of the same paragraph of the same page of the same document. Quote, the estimated cash receipts for January 2019 is $86.1 million, leaving an estimated ending cash balance at the end of January 2019 of $4.8 million. That's my first reference. I'll be happy to pass this on to the clerks. If the colleagues weren't at the public hearing where this was first made aware to me, I understand, I believe it to be true, that you actually disseminated this to every member of the body. I just happen to print out a copy and highlight a certain section to support my claim. So I'm going to go ahead and raise my hand if somebody wants to come and get this. I'll provide copies to the rest of the body. Again, for the public record and the listening audience, I'm reporting a statement that was published in the Transition Advisory Committee report, page 103. I'd also like to get this back because there are other supporting statements within the same document that I'd like to refer to eventually. If I can get the original.
Senator
Thank you.
Castro, we're going to take a 1-minute recess. Hi, the legislature is back from recess. Senator Will Castro, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the exchange earlier, I just want to say on a lighter note, if the strategy is designed to help me lose my thought, I think it's working. But in all seriousness, you should all have a copy of my first reference. Now, if I can beg the indulgence of the body, I really would like to finish a couple thoughts.
Senator Castro, could you please address the podium?
Yeah, I'll look at you, Speaker. Just keep smiling because it's very contentious behind me. If I can beg the indulgence of the body to finish my thoughts, and I'll read into the public record what I'm citing. But if I had to stop every sentence to convey and replicate this, will be here, and I don't think that should be used against my 15 minutes. I was advised earlier I used 5 minutes already for the first half of my page, and I don't think that was due to my fault. But nonetheless, the first reference was from the Transition Committee report, reporting just January's finances, ma'am. If you refer to local media, and I'm not saying that's a very credible source, but if you refer to local media accounts, Governor Calvo reported a $20 to $25 million FY18 surplus. But let's not take his word for it, the previous governor. Let's go ahead and refer to some things that were provided to us in writing. I'm going to go ahead and direct your attention to the document, and if you don't have one in your files or one readily available, at the end of my discussion, I'll go ahead and provide a copy for you. I'm going to be referencing the senatorial budget briefing that was provided by the Government Fiscal Discipline Team on or around February 6, 2019. And I'll read from this chart here, and basically it says that there's an estimated single-year surplus of $13.5 million unaudited. Unaudited, I get it, that means we didn't audit, okay, but this is what we're tracking. And it's affirmed that the prior year was another cash surplus, but let me not take this on its face value. Let me go ahead and go to the committee report. And in the committee report, and this is why to my earliest objection, and I appreciate whoever established that as a matter of rule and operation by which we govern this body. This is why the committee report is so important, so that we can go back and look at statements and challenge it or use it in affirmation of our position. And I quote from page 10 of, I'm not exactly sure how this is numbered, but page 10 of the committee report that I received at 10:46 a.m., it says, and I quote, "Oh no, the surplus we're working with, Mr. Byrne, the audit's not done, but we believe that we will end fiscal year 18 with a surplus." Okay? I also have another source from the same Transition Committee report. I'm sorry I don't have it readily available. It's in front of me somewhere, that also reports an FY18 surplus. So it begs the question, ma'am. It begs the question. If we're going to set it, if we did that well after October 1, 2018 financially as a government, I'm not even going into the cost-cutting, cost-containment part of this discussion. Why do we need an additional $9 million? Oh, no, it's not a cash shortfall. I think we need to refer to the letter that was provided to us by the good chairman. The question then becomes unrealized revenue. It's only a shortfall if you spend more than you expected to receive. I think we need to hold the line. My real question to my colleagues who returned to the 35th Guam Legislature is where are we going? Are we going to simply walk away and abandon the position we took as a body in the 34th to look at some fiscal restraint measures, such as reorganization of government as proffered by the former Senator Frank Blas Uggan Jr.? What about the SAR, the supplemental appropriations, as proffered and passed by the former Senator Mike Nicholas himself? What about the $200 million tax liability that's also cited in the Transition Committee report? What about, and I didn't vote for this, but what about that measure that said we're not going to fund deputy directors going forward in January? What about that? And the court struck it down. But let me be clear. The court said it was inorganic, that we can't tell the executive, the chief executive, not to do that. But there's nothing to stop the chief executive from making the right decisions, to live in conformance with the spirit of the law, to control costs. Now, I went on the record to say I support the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration because I think they have a great plan to not conduct business as usual. But I'm asking this body, let's go till April to their priority. Their fiscal spending priorities are given to us to review, because I really believe that we're going to finish this year ahead as we had projected in the last body. And I'll close with my statements of fact, and I'll provide this to the staff to make copies. I'm going to start down my list of questions for the good chairman here, someone whose integrity is not in question. I admire and respect the individual, and I will commit to work with him on other solutions. But where are we at with the anticipated visitor arrivals and the resulting BPT? And I'm referring to the fiscal year 2019 income business tax preliminary projections as provided by the Office of Finance and Budget. And this is on their website. So if you want to log on and check it out while I'm finishing my position, you can do that. That's just one reference, Speaker. This thing is riddled with all kinds of potential economic indicators about where we could be as a government without having to raise taxes. As a matter of fact, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I think we're in a good position to come back to that 1% BPT as we promised if the economy was to turn around. Now, to my questions. If you want to remind me of how much time I have, or maybe Senator Moylan would yield, but I do have a question, and he can answer. If you want to do it one at a time, we can do that, ma'am. As a matter of fact, I'll take your cue on that. To the prime sponsor or any of the co-authors, where are we at with the SAR in terms of the aggressive collections that we were requiring the administration to undertake to recover anywhere from $150 to $200 million? That's my question. Should I, and does that count against my time?
Thank you, Senator. Senator San Agustin, would you like to answer the inquiry as to the status of the SAR?
Madam Speaker, in reference to the aggressive pursuit of taxes, we'd have to ask the Revenue and Tax to come in and testify, because we haven't seen any major collection of taxes. And if we expected that within 60 days of this new administration, just one comment I have: if there is truly a surplus, then why were many agencies not given all their allotments in 2018? And that's not up for debate. That's a matter of record. Thank you.
Senator Castro.
And thank you. And no, that doesn't satisfy my question, but I appreciate the response. I have another question, ma'am. Where are we at with the cigarette tax stamp?
On that inquiry, Senator San Agustin. Can you repeat the question again?
So I'm basically going down a list of previous initiatives.
Right.
I'll restate the exact question. So I basically listed 2 initiatives that were on the table, potential sources of revenue. Actually, not potential, defined sources of revenue. And my second question was, where are we at? What is the status of the Cigarette Tax Stamp Act?
On that question, Cigarette Stamp Act.
Maybe I got the words mixed up, but I think you understand.
We're going to take a 30-second recess. The legislature is back from recess. Senator Castro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I understand that they may not have that information readily available, and I guess, so I'll withdraw that question, but my point by asking those questions is anybody scrubbing this and looking at everything we've done in the 34th to stabilize the economy, and where are we tracking with all of that? That's my point. And then I have one more question, and I'd like to close, and so could someone just let me know when I have the last 3 minutes to close? Thank you. My next question, and I'll go ahead and pass this on to the OFB, the chairman, the good chairman. Does he refute, it's a yes or no answer, does he refute any of the claims established in either the Transition Committee report, in the fiscal year 2019 OFB report, in the committee report that was published? Any of the statements that I had made for the public record, does he stand in refutation of the assertions made that there was a cash surplus or that we collected more revenues than expenditures, at least for 2019, January?
On that question, Senator San Agustin, would you like him to repeat it, or he asked for a yes or no answer? You yield.
Madam Speaker, yes, I don't know what he was asking, because I was trying to decipher everything else he was saying. Everything that he was relating to ended when the last administration ended in December. Everything this current administration is doing is trying to reorganize, restructure, and to ask questions relating to the Stamp Act, the secret stamp collection, and all the collections he once referred to the last year. I only have really one statement to make. If there was so much money, even with the transition report that has come out that I've asked publicly, has the administration adopted it and accepted it as true and correct? Never was answered. So I really don't have any answers for my good colleague, my committee member. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Senator Castro.
Thank you. And again, you know, I don't stand in opposition of the bill on its face if we can thoroughly debate it with all the information in front of us, with the right people who get paid the money for their subject matter expertise to answer those questions. And just as a point of information, this is not from the prior administration's records. These are the same people who've been working for that administration and this administration. And I even cited a January figure. But let me go ahead and close. I want to close by saying, by passing this tax provision, okay, we're not making good on the commitment of the 34th Guam Legislature to collect on taxes and tightening the enforcement aspect, that we rather increase taxes before reducing government spending. If we pass this, we're basically saying, and this is the sentiment of a senator who served in the 34th as well, that regardless of what is or isn't being done to control costs, we're going to go ahead and pass this tax provision as a revenue enhancement strategy. We want a segment of this population to pay for the $9 million that we won't realize if we don't pass this tax. I think we need to put an end to government growth and increases in existing. We need to stop introducing new taxes. We need to roll back some of the ones if there's a projected surplus. If our government itself is overspending and not living within its means, within its revenues, projected and realized, then it's the government that's the problem, not those who made an honest living and purchased property or who are the beneficiaries of their parents' or grandparents' successes, or not passing a regressive tax that is passed on to somebody who's living in an apartment or a fourplex. As I close, Madam Speaker, I want to thank the good chairman of the committee, and I respect him, and I pledge to work closer with him. I remember him on the Board of Education, and he's an upstanding member of this community. He probably has arguably the toughest job in this body right now. But this does not negate the fact that OFB and the prior legislature assured us time and time again that we passed the balanced budget, and fast forward to August of 2018, 6 months later, after we had taken those extreme measures in the spring of 2018 and passed the budget in August, 4 to 6 months have passed. So we have some real figures upon which to conduct our assessments. Although the mover of the bill was successful in getting the bill on the agenda by suspending the rules, I'd still like to ask my colleagues to remember that in this election, people wanted change. They spoke with authority when they elected new members and ones that maintained their trust. And the results of the election demonstrate that they wanted a legislative body that, in my opinion, can improve the quality of life for everybody. And I don't understand how passing a real property improvement tax initiative upon the backs of a segment of this population or any additional tax improves the quality of life for anyone. As a matter of fact, and I'm no economist, right? I'm just a social studies teacher, but I don't think that could in any way intermediate or long-term stimulate this economy. Again, and in my last minute, thank you for the reminder. The bill, after all things considered, does not do what it's intended to do. I think, in my opinion, instead it penalizes the successes of hardworking, law-abiding residents of this island. And I would strongly discourage my colleagues that you don't reward those who worked harder and earn more by taxing them more, Madam Speaker. And that's what I think, in my opinion, this bill does. Thank you. Thank you.
Sidzuas Masi, Senator Castro. On the main motion, I have Senator Mary Torres, then Senator Marsh Teichno, then Senator Luis Munoz. Senator Mary Torres, you're recognized on the main motion.
Sidzuas Masi, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of Bill 4-35. And I want to remind all of us that Bill 4-35 is a very simple concept. It is a bill that amends a technicality to the Budget Act that was passed in the 34th Guam Legislature for fiscal year 2019. It is a bill that includes an amendment of 2 words that comprise 6 letters and 1 space. Very basic concept. The reason I support this bill is that we went through a process in the 34th Guam Legislature, which is probably one of the most politically charged budget processes that I've experienced, with all sorts of concerns about what is the right course, what are the proper taxes that need to be implemented to arrive at a balanced budget. As a result of a technicality that was later found and opined by the Attorney Generals, that technicality, that oversight, clearly an oversight because the intention of the plain language was understood by all, but the plain language unfortunately caused a technical concern. That resulted, if read on its face, would result in a $9 million shortfall to what would have been a balanced budget in all good faith. So I don't understand why anybody would not want to at least take a position of making whole the budget bill, making it whole. If we understand that a minor technicality that involved 2 words, 6 letters and 1 space can't be changed so easily, so logically, so reasonably through a bill such as 4-35. And it is for this reason that I support this bill. We're not talking about all the other things that have to come in place. That will be the administrators, the executive branch's role, to make good with the budget bill that we passed, possibly make better with all the existing laws, including the tax laws and collections. But at the very least, let us please give our governor, our executive branch, and ourselves the benefit of a balanced budget. Not a budget that we know, because of a technicality, has a $9 million hole. It has now bled $9 million. Let us work to patch that hole. Looking forward prospectively, we all expect and trust that the executive branch, in working with this legislative body, will do its best to generate sufficient funds in excess of what has been projected in the Budget Act. Should that occur, that only means more money to fix our roads, to fix our schools that need repair, to put adequate supplies in the schools, to adequately stock the pharmaceuticals at GMH, to adequately hire badly needed personnel in law enforcement. Prospectively, we want all good things, but let us at least start from a solid ground. Solid ground meaning a balanced budget that is whole, that is now going to be made whole if we have the good sense to fix a technicality that we've realized, to make at least the budget bill have the monies that were projected intact, not short $9 million because of a technicality. Madam Speaker, I sincerely hope that, notwithstanding all the pressures, that we can at least think reasonably, because we are not, when we pass the Budget Act and this increase in real property taxes for properties, for taxes for levied on properties, on improvements on land with a value of $1 million or more, was contemplated and well thought out and vetted. And Madam Speaker, let's be sensible. This tax, as most people understood was a tax on people who could afford it more than others, say, who would be affected by a sales tax or an increased BPT. And the premise when nobody wants taxes, I've always fought against taxes, but at some point, those that can afford to do it for the greater good would be willing to do their share for the greater good. That's all we're looking for. And so let's not lose sight of it. Bill 4-35 is a very simple concept. We don't have to overthink the fact that it affects the Budget Act, making it whole, putting in 2 critical words that comprise only 6 letters. Basic. But it at least makes us whole again. It gives our governor, our executive branch, something to work for. We've identified that as a result of this technical error in the last Budget Act, this omission of these 6 letters in 1 space, it resulted in a $9 million gap. Let's put that gap in, work with the governor. Let's make 2019 a better year for Guam. Let's make it better, but let's start by at least putting a Band-Aid where we see that a Band-Aid can be made. Let's not be stupid. We have a big mandate. We have a lot of things to do with tax policies that are in place, tax collections that need to happen. We have so many problems, but at least let's start from where we can be whole. With a Budget Act that was so contentious, but we arrived at something that we all believed, or a majority of us at least believed in the 34th Guam Legislature, that it was feasible. Without this amendment, it is not feasible. It is no longer balanced. I want to make it balanced. I want to go on goodwill. I want to start this new year on good footing with all good intentions. And so I thank the 4 co-sponsors of this bill, and I encourage the rest of the senators to please join me in supporting this. Let's just go back to the basics, fix what was obviously an omission, a very embarrassing omission, but, you know, the intention was there, and God help us that sometimes things are so literal that it bites us in the bottom. But in this case, we can do something about it. Si Diyos maasi.
Buen Pabetsu, Senator Torres. Senator Marsh Taitsunu, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Situas Maasi. So, I want to make some comments in being support of Bill 435. Now, raising taxes is something that I believe that should be a last resort. But this has to be balanced out with the idea of being responsible, and that's what we as leaders in the community are being asked to do, being responsible. I agree with others that have spoken in support that this is a correction. It passed last year, the bill that this is correcting passed last year with enough support. It passed with a lot of thought, as has been mentioned by the former good speaker, to pass on both its intent but also its need. To not carry forward with that, we are being asked to put our agencies and our community's health and our needs at risk. For example, we have the Department of Chamorro Affairs, where the Guam Library System sits. They are presently, the branches of those public libraries only open 1 day a week, and yet our community needs them so very much. We have the potential this time around to be reinventing and reinvigorating those institutions to be providing important, substantive programs for our youth. And we know that our youth are at risk in so many ways right now, and we can't keep taking and taking and taking from our youth and seeing their rates of drug abuse and suicide and other very high statistics that are higher than national average continue to rise. We have to be proactive. And in order to be proactive, we have to be supporting institutions like our public libraries. Right now, without this to assure us that we're not risking what they have to offer, we're already dealing with over $400,000 that their funding is not being met by. It's not helping them meet their needs. We have the PBS Guam that is also being asked to deal with a gap in funds if we do not continue to uphold that commitment made last year. So again, we are dealing with an entity. It has 20-year-old equipment. It's had many positions that have been left open, and we in the community have all paid a price for that. Again, getting to our youth. Our youth are educated. We as a community are uplifted by our local programs, and yet we haven't been able to fulfill those in many ways because of our budget shortfalls. So the reality is we have agency after agency after agency that is dealing with staff that are 25% or lower than some of their previous levels, and yet they're still being asked to service the entire community, the entire island. We have partial closures, like with the library, which is more than partial in my estimate. I mean, if it's only open one day a week, that's basically almost full closure. We have a lot to put in order. How do we deal with that $9 million or more shortfall if farther down the road we take this risk and we look back and we see that with all good intentions, we have not been able to close that gap? A far more prudent, a far more responsible approach is to stick to the road that we entered upon last year with this commitment by the last legislative body. Be responsible, deal with the issues at hand, and take care of putting things in order, getting ourselves on the best foot possible, and then, and only then do I think it's responsible to go back and look at some of these issues that might be re-examined about whether they are truly needed. But until our needs are met, I cannot support putting at risk all of these agencies that provide so much for our community. Yes, so Sijuis Masi.
Buen provecho, Senator Marsh Taichino. Senator Luis Munoz on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm getting nightmares of our last budget session. And I know only half of the body is actually laughing because they realize that, you know, the intense pressure that we were under in the last budget, not to exclude even the staff that was here in the middle of the night, you know, being called at midnight. And just to remember exactly what the pressure that we were under in that last budget session, it almost felt like we were held hostage at the tax cuts. And we had to make decisions that maybe some of us just didn't feel was right, but we needed to make the right decision at that moment. So I can understand that some of my colleagues here probably want to make good on some of those promises that we made, not just to the administration, but to the people also as well. And so I'm trying to find a compromise here to be responsible for the decisions that we made in the 34th legislature, and to also be at the same time optimistic about what the new administration is going to bring. So I'm trying to figure out a way where we can actually do that. So Madam Speaker, if I will, I would like to ask the page to pass out an amendment, if we can have that done. And
We'll take a brief recess. The legislature's back from recess. Senator Louise, on the amendment, everybody's got their copy. Do you?
I would like to continue speaking on it, Madam
Yes.
Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The reason why I did this is because really I wanted to protect our families, the families that are renting, the families that can't afford to buy homes. These are this tax cost is going to be passed on to the average person renting homes. And so that was some of the things that I was toying with, because at the time when we voted in the budget session, we were short millions and millions of dollars, and we had to figure out how we were going to generate that income. So I felt I was a hostage at that point in time. Well, now we can try to find a compromise with how revenue and tax claims that they're going to be very aggressive on collecting taxes. In order for us to fix this, this is our responsibility as a former 34th, right? We're going to try to fix this by adding on those last two words, or those two words in that last bill. Why don't we make a compromise, if we can, and give the opportunity for the current administration to do what they said they were going to do, and at the same time still be responsible for what we passed in the last budget session. So the amendment reads, Madam Speaker, to add on line 8 after the word thereon, we will insert, except that multifamily residential property, including apartment complexes, condominiums, townhomes, or any other property where 2 or more units are attached. The threshold supra of $1 million shall not be reached unless the average value of improvements per unit is equal to or exceeds $1 million, period. Then it adds on, average value of improvements per unit for the purposes of this section equals the total value of improvements divided by the number of residential units. So really what this amendment is doing, Madam Speaker, is like our other colleagues said, the people that can actually afford it. Well, the average families can't afford a raise in their rent. And obviously this is what's going to happen if we add on or more. So this will specifically target the people who can't afford it, like the warehouses and the office spaces and I don't know, maybe some of the malls who are generating some income from stores who are retail stores. So that's what this amendment is meant to do. And you know, I'm welcome to hear the discussion on it and see where we can go from there.
Thank you, Senator Muñoz. To clarify the amendment, it will be add on line 7 after the word thereon insert. Senator Lee, you have the floor.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues. I want to thank the proffer of this amendment for bringing this forward, and I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the discussion. One of the questions that I had, if the author would so yield, is what the impact of this would be. I mean, how many residential properties are we talking about, and what would be the potential impact? What's the dollar amount? Because I want to be able to just take a look at what we might need to balance in terms of money that's going back into our public school system and providing that those educational opportunities for our children. And so if the author would yield, I'd like to know what the cost would be for this and what the impact would be. Sujus Masi.
Thank you. Senator Muñoz, do you yield?
Madam Speaker, I don't have the exact dollar figures of what the impact will be or what we'll be saving or what we're going to be adding on to the budget. What I do have is this opportunity to protect the families. And for me, I think that's really what we're here for. We're here to protect the families, and this is what I'm doing. So maybe we can make, like the author of the bill said, we can make the experts determine that. At this time, we're trying to just fix what we made possible in the last budget session by adding on the 2 words or more. And so here's a compromise, and this is what the compromise is. I don't have the exact dollar figures. I do know that there are a couple that are listed under the multi-family listing. I'm not sure where we get that at, but I know there are a couple of land and homes developments that are listed $1 million and more. I'm not sure what the full figure is. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Lee, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Senator Tello Taitigui?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this amendment. I think the author of this amendment made it clear that this is to protect those families. You know, you look at warehouses, you looked at office space and buildings, and those generate revenue, you know, but these are homes of families who cannot afford a regular home, where they go into apartments or condos or townhouses. So, Madam Speaker, I think this is a great compromise to this bill. For those who are not sure on whether to vote yes on this bill or not, but this definitely helps when it comes to those people who cannot afford this tax hike, which we both know that is going to trickle down to those people who are renting these apartments and condominiums. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to speak on this amendment in full support of. Thank you.
Sijus Masi, Senator Taitigui. On the amendment, Senator Shelton, you are recognized, and then Senator Marsh, did you have also? So, Senator Shelton, please proceed.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the mover of the amendment for coming up with this, and I do very much appreciate this, and I understand what she's trying to do in keeping the costs from trickling down to those who are renting in these type of properties. I just want to bring up a point that I recall from an OPA report in 2018 that said Guam has unrealized revenues of about $40.2 million in real property taxes because of a glitch in the computer system, that's not allowing us to properly tax these multi-dwelling properties such as condominiums. So I think that that's something that we also have to take into consideration with this amendment.
Sijus Masi, Senator Shelton. Also, Senator March Taichino, you are recognized on the amendment.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker. So in looking at this amendment, again, I, along with other speakers, support the idea of wanting to help safeguard our community members at the grassroots level, the family owners and those that are renters. But I'm thinking that there is a difference between homeowners and business owners. Yes, there may be some trickle-down effect, but I guess I'm looking for ways to further think about this. So I was going to ask a question about the business owners. I understand not wanting to impact the renters. So I guess my question would be if the author sees any way to separate those two concepts, that some businesses are not now being treated differently than other businesses. If she has a proposal or a comment or the ability to speak on how this is treating businesses differently, and if she sees any solutions to that.
Thank you, Senator Marsh Taichino. Senator Munya, on the inquiry, do you wish to yield?
Yeah, my thoughts on that, Madam Speaker, is that yeah, I understand that people who are providing homes for people to live in is a business, but these people are not actually making money when they live in that home compared to other businesses that have, say, for example, malls, where they're kind of like subleasing for other businesses to make money. So you can't really compare the two. Yeah, that's where I see the difference, compared retail businesses, malls, for example, that rent out their units to smaller businesses that make money. You can't compare that to an apartment complex or a condo unit that's providing homes for people to live in. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Munoz. Senator March Taichino, does that answer your question?
No. Perhaps partially, but I'm pretty sure, and maybe I guess my question would be where that dividing line is. Perhaps there's a difference between a family or an owner of a duplex, but certainly there are situations where there are owners out there who potentially have numerous units, and so something along the lines of there are potentially situations out there where they own 100 units or more, and so certainly they would be making money. So again, or could we get some numbers that differentiate, or would the author consider differentiating between those who have a duplex or 4 units, a fourplex, versus those who have units in the dozens or hundreds?
It's Vice Speaker Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to clarify, this $1 million or more, it speaks on a specific piece of property. So I'm thinking if you own a condominium, if you own maybe 2 or 3 condos, you have, they're all separate property taxes. And so if you have a condo that's $500,000, the value of $500,000, and another condo that's worth $500,000, and then another condo that's worth $500,000, you do renovation to one condominium, it's a separate tax. And so, although I do understand the intent of the amendment, I believe it's a good amendment, but just to push more clarification, they're in separate tax categories. So if I did a renovation on my $500,000 condo, I would not be impacted. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. We're still on the amendment. Senator Joe San Augustine, then Senator Will.
Madam Speaker, I rise in objection to the amendment, but I do ask my fellow committee member, Senator, the author of the amendment, to join me, and we will go and ask, because we do oversee housing, GURA, and the affordable housing, and we will reach out to Revenue and Tax, the oversight chair, to open up the books on the real property section and find out what's out there, because in the coming budget 2020, if we need to make the adjustment so it doesn't impact the less fortunate families, then we make the adjustment. Then we introduce the amendment to whatever the law is. But to make it today and not know the impact, I would have to object to the amendment. But I do like the way it's written, just need to investigate it more.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. I apologize. Senator Torres, you were on the list. Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, with all due respect, may I please inquire with legal counsel if this amendment constitutes a substantive amendment that may have to go through a public hearing process? Because the discussion, Madam Speaker, suggests that there are so many unknowns, and it is really a whole different set of circumstances that are now being contemplated with this amendment that were not part of the original budget bill, that section of the budget bill. And also, I want to note further that in my understanding at the time that this section was included in the Budget Act, we were considering that there were just over 500 properties that would be affected by this tax levy, this additional tax levy. So it's already a finite number. So my question is, with all due respect, does this constitute a substantive amendment that would require that it not proceed and that it actually should have a public hearing?
Cito Smasi, Senator Torres, we're going to take a brief recess. The legislature is back from recess. I'm going to ask Senator Mary Torres, if you may, can you please rephrase the question?
Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify my question. Simply stated, I'm inquiring of legal counsel whether the amendment that is proffered is germane to the bill. The bill, as I understand, is a bill to add 2 words to clarify the levy on properties with a value of $1 million or more, and whether this amendment is germane to that very specific intent of Bill 4-35.
Yes. Madam Senator, I want to share with you that under the interpretation and what I believe is germaneness to the issue, I know it's a pretty close call, but I'm going to say the germaneness is there, but I will give the body the opportunity to object if they feel otherwise. So I think there is relevance based on the issue at hand. So there is germaneness to the issue right now. You still have the floor, Senator Torres. You may proceed. But again, I will offer, if anybody wishes to overrule me, they can do so.
Okay. Situs Masi, Madam Speaker. With that, then, I'd like to rise in opposition to the amendment on the simple premise that Bill 4-34 is intended to make the Budget Act whole by correcting a technicality. This amendment has no known, tangible effect. We have no dollar value of what this would mean, and so insofar as how it affects our ability as a body to make the Budget Act whole, it, I believe, will still leave a gap, especially since at the time we were passing it, there were just a little over 500 properties affected. How much of those properties include this specific type of residential property is unknown, and the corresponding effect to the budget is unknown. And on that basis of the unknowns and the inability to make whole, I object. Thank you.
Situs Masi,
Or I do not support. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I do not support.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to apologize again. I had Senator Pito Terlahi before I had Senator Torres. So in the lineup to speak on the amendment, I will go ahead and address Senator Pito Torres and then Senator Will Castro. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker. Dosa na punto. I want to bring up 2 points here. They mentioned $13 million of surplus that is coming out, right? And then the way I understand the amendment here is that if your property is less than $1 million, you would not really suffer for taxes, right? But if you go beyond the $1 million, if you go beyond the $1 million because you expanded your building, whatever, with the cost of the property, then the tax will be imposed, right? When they mention, the previous speaker mentioned about the $13 million. Malinikay, lugot pe. $13 million na surplus, and then all the departments and agencies, Gwinigi Departamento ni Government of Guam, they're crying because we're in deficit. There's no funds. So how do you paratahongi? With regards to the testimony that were brought up by several of our colleagues, I want to ask that, because we are no expert, we're not economists, we're not professionals, we're not masters of accounting. And we don't anticipate surplus and things like that just to reading out from the paper. So I want to ask if we can at least table the amendment. I disagree with this amendment totally, because we don't really know what we're talking about. We need the expert to come in and tell us what it is. Are we going to save money? Are we going to have our people spending more money? So I just want to make a motion here to kind of just table this amendment, because I don't like the way it sounds. I don't like the testimony that was brought up here. It's very confusing. One is saying $30 billion surplus. The other is saying that, you know, we're not gonna pay if you expand your business or your property, whatever it may be, because you're gonna be paying taxes. And if you go beyond $1 million, sige kinipindeko. I don't know if I'm wrong. But I can trustfully say that my interpretation of all the testimony here is confusing right now. Deficit and non-deficit and all that. So I want to make a motion to kind of just table this amendment so we can get the expert in, so we can talk to the experts. Let's just not move in and say, okay, let's carry on with this amendment, because we're not really sure. And I'm making a motion to table this amendment until we get complete, trustful analysis of what the situation may be. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Si Masi, Senator Pito, I will take the testimony as a part of the objection at this time, and I will go ahead and address Senator Will Castro. Is there anybody else before you speak, sir? Anybody else on the amendment? If not, Senator Castro, you can
Thank you, Madam
proceed.
Speaker. I rise in support of the amendment, and I couldn't agree more with the previous speaker that because there's a lack of detailed information, that perhaps we shouldn't table just the amendment. We should probably go table the entire measure, or go into the committee of the whole and bring in the subject matter experts. But notwithstanding that, I do have a question to the prime author, who may be able to answer this for us, since the chairman authored Bill 4-35. If he
You're
would
asking it from the author of Bill 4 and not the
Yes, ma'am.
amendment on hand. Please state your question.
My question to the chairman or co-sponsors of Bill 4-35, since they produced this comprehensive listing of properties that would be affected by Bill 4-35, my question is, and my assumption is that they scrubbed this and they thought about this, they analyzed it. Perhaps they would have the information, since they have the rolls here, about how many, what small percentage, aggregate or accurate, would be affected by this based on the amendment. That's my question.
Senator San Agustin, will you yield to Senator Castro's inquiry?
Yes, Madam Speaker. As a matter of fact, I wish that was asked at the hearing. And then we could have asked the Department of Revenue and Tax to give an answer. That's why I asked. I object to the amendment, and that after, if the bill is passed, we will go, I will invite my fellow committee member, Senator, the previous speaker, and everybody. We'll all sit down, we'll call the experts, and we'll come up with what direction we need to go. And if we find, and I'm going to bet, I'm going to knock on wood, I'm going to bet that when Revenue and Tax goes out and does a compliance check to many of these homes, I would not be surprised if many of them are bed and breakfasts that are not registered. Many of them are doing rentals that are not registered. And then we don't have to be talking about the $1 million, because they'll get taxed, and then they'll get fined, and then the system will start fixing itself. But I'll prefer we wait until we get to that point. Thank you.
Senator Castro.
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but usually it's the other way around. If I stand corrected, usually we go in the committee of the whole before we pass an appropriations bill. And this is clearly not an appropriations bill, but I would recommend, and it's up to him to deal with this on moving forward, that we actually talk about it in good detail before we pass the measure, not the other way around. Thank you.
On the amendment of Senator Muñoz, Would you wish to close? You can proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I'm just glad that the discussion is being brought up because really this doesn't necessarily have to be a cutthroat decision. So this amendment could persuade some of the people to vote for this bill. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make a compromise here rather than just saying, let's just tax everybody $1 million and more, which that tax is going to be passed on to our individual families. Say, for example, and I don't want to just use this example as a deciding factor for some people, but some of the people that live, for example, in Hemlani apartments, if this bill is passed, maybe their rent is going to go up another $25. Definitely, they can't afford that. They can barely even afford the monthly rent to begin with. So if we pass Bill 435 without this amendment, that amount is going to be passed on to people such as the people that rent at Hemlani Apartments, or any apartment for that matter, because the apartment owner is going to pass that cost on to our individual families. Now, we can't compare this to the people who are making money off of retail spaces because they're making money too as well. The families are not making money, they're just trying to live day to day, paycheck to paycheck. And that's really who I'm trying to protect here. Not the people who are making that have $1 million or more in property, but the people that they're passing that cost on to. And that's who I'm trying to protect. It doesn't have to be a cutthroat decision. We can find this compromise, and I'm thinking that this amendment is that compromise. Let's protect the families that can't afford to buy a house, and they can only afford a certain amount of rent. If we pass this bill, that cost is going to be passed on to them. And then where are they going to be? We'll have a bigger homeless situation here. We don't want that. We're trying to protect the families, is what we're doing. And really, Madam Speaker, there's no guarantee in any budget projections ever. There's never been a guarantee. No matter how much we project with budget, even the previous speaker said, there's a glitch in the collections for condo units. We can't even guarantee that what we projected in the last budget session is even going to be collected to begin with. So I'm just offering an opportunity for us to compromise, and maybe we can persuade some of this body to vote for this bill. If not, then, well, at least I tried. And that's why I proffered this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Muñoz, on the amendment, there was an objection. So all those are in favor of Senator Muñoz's amendment, please do so by raising your hand. Motion fails. On the main motion, anybody wishing to speak on the main motion? If not, Senator San Agustin.
Madam Speaker, I just ask my colleagues to support this bill, and I ask that this bill be moved to the voting file.
On the motion to move to the voting file, third reading voting file, without any objection, motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and take a 30-second recess, and then we'll come back to further deliberate the time on when we will vote. Clerk? This legislature is back from recess. We're going to go ahead and take a moment's recess again. I do apologize. This legislature is back from recess. Majority Leader, Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have exhausted all items on the second reading file. I make a motion to reconvene at 2:30 today for voting.
On that motion, are there any objections? No, hearing no objections, motion carries. We will be back here for 2:30 sharp to start voting on the bills and the legislative concurrence. Sizo Smasi.